They handed my $250,000 trust fund to my golden boy brother, then called me selfish when I asked why. 4 days later, I got a message. Olivia, please, we need to talk. It's urgent. They didn't know the girl they abandoned had become something they would soon need. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, this story is for you. Like, share, and subscribe, because justice tastes even sweeter when no one sees it coming. I still remember the way my mom shrugged when I asked about the trust fund Grandpa left me. We gave it to Dylan. You weren't really using it. Using it? It wasn't a kitchen blender. It was my future. I'd just lost my job, was barely making rent, and when I reached out for support, my own parents gave me a cold lecture about priorities. Dylan, my older brother, needed a head start. I wasn't even angry at first. I was numb. What they didn't know was that for the past 7 years, I'd been building something in silence, designing an AI-based logistics tool while working late shifts and eating ramen. I kept my success hidden on purpose. No LinkedIn updates. No Instagram flexes. Just me, coding quietly in the background. Because after watching my family praise Dylan's every average achievement while ignoring my struggles, I knew they only cared when it benefited them. They said Dylan needed the trust fund to open a family business. I later found out he blew half of it on a rental sports car and influencer collabs for a product that didn't even exist. Didn't say a word. I just waited until last Thursday. Mom texted me, "Can you come by the house tonight? It's about your father. Please." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Because by then, I had just closed a $4.2 million acquisition deal with a major e-commerce firm, and I was about to become their chief technology consultant. And when I finally walked into that living room, their faces dropped. But they hadn't even heard the real reason I was there. Dad stood up the second I walked in, like he was about to deliver some dramatic apology. But all I saw was panic behind his fake smile. Mom tried to hug me, calling me sweetheart, like she hadn't erased me from the family bank account 6 months ago. I stayed still. I didn't come here for fake warmth. I came here for the truth, and maybe finally some revenge. "I know you're upset," Dad began, glancing at Mom for support. "But Dylan's business is struggling. He just needs a little more time to get things going. We thought maybe you could help?" Help? The same people who emptied my trust fund without telling me now wanted my help? I looked around at the house they mortgaged again to fund Dylan's doomed project. I noticed the unpaid bills peeking from under a pile of junk mail on the coffee table. They weren't just desperate. They were drowning. "Help how?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. I wanted to hear them say it. Mom hesitated. Then she pulled out a folder. "We need an investor," she whispered. "Your name came up in the local business paper. Something about your company?" Ah, so that was it. They didn't want me back. They wanted the money they thought I had. I smiled politely, flipping through the folder. It was worse than I imagined. Dylan's company had no product, no revenue model, and no staff, just expensive marketing photos and fake testimonials. I almost laughed. They had ruined my financial future to fund this dumpster fire. Dad leaned in. "We made mistakes, Olivia, but we're still family. If you could just loan us—" "Loan?" I interrupted. "You already took my money, without asking, remember?" The silence in the room was suffocating. Even the ticking wall clock sounded guilty. I stood up, placing the folder back on the table. "I'll think about it," I said, heading for the door. And just as I opened it, I turned and added, "But you should know, your company, the one Dylan's trying to build, his entire logistics concept, it's based on tech I already patented." Their jaws dropped. Dad's face turned white. Mom looked like she couldn't breathe. "You didn't just steal from your daughter," I said, voice sharp. "You bet everything on the wrong child." Then I walked out. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I emailed my lawyer. Time to enforce the patent, I wrote simply. He knew exactly what I meant. Dylan's so-called company had lifted key concepts from a white paper I'd published, under a pseudonym 2 years ago. At the time, I didn't want attention. I just wanted to prove I could build something real. But now I needed everyone to know it was mine. Within 48 hours, Dylan received a cease and desist letter. The panic must have hit fast, because his Instagram, once filled with rented jets and fake business meetings, suddenly went silent. He even deleted the post where he claimed he'd revolutionized the delivery game. That was my code he was bragging about. Meanwhile, Mom started texting again. "Olivia, please, let's talk." We didn't know. Didn't know? Of course they didn't. They never bothered to ask what I was working on all those years. They were too busy throwing parties. For Dylan, when he sold fake fitness programs and called it entrepreneurship. Later that week, I got an invitation to a family dinner. Not Thanksgiving, not a birthday. Just dinner. No reason. I showed up. I wanted them to look me in the eye this time. The moment I walked in, the room went quiet. Dylan was there, too, slouched on the couch like a grounded teenager. I almost didn't recognize him without his designer sunglasses and ego. Dad stood first, clearing his throat like he was about to say something noble. "We owe you an apology, Olivia. Waited. We didn't see what you were building. We underestimated you." Mom nodded, her hands folded. "We were wrong. I looked at all of them. People who'd called me difficult, selfish, even ungrateful when I dared to ask about my own money." I took a deep breath and pulled out a simple printed sheet. "What's that?" Dylan asked. "A proposal," I said, calmly. "I'm launching a logistics accelerator in Chicago. I'm investing in real founders. You can apply if you want." He blinked. "You want me to apply?" "Like everyone else," I said. "You'll need a working model, traction, and full disclosure of your past mismanagement." Mom's mouth opened in shock. Dad's face hardened. "You'd do this to your own brother?" he snapped. I leaned forward, voice steady. "You already did this to your own daughter." And just like that, I stood and left again. But this time, they didn't chase me. 3 days later, the story exploded online. A tech blog picked up the patent dispute and ran a headline that made me pause for a second. "Local startup queen crushes fraudulent brother's business with her own code." Within hours, it was trending. My LinkedIn inbox was full. Investors, tech founders, even a few former coworkers who'd once laughed at me for thinking too big. Suddenly, everyone wanted a meeting. Everyone wanted a piece of the girl who'd been forgotten. But I wasn't doing it for the headlines. I was doing it because they needed to see it. The family who called me invisible, who stole my future and handed it to someone who didn't even know what to do with it. I didn't reply to Mom's new messages. I didn't answer when Dylan called, pretending to be supportive. Instead, I focused on my accelerator launch. Opening day was surreal. Flashing cameras, reporters, a line of hungry entrepreneurs pitching ideas, and me, standing on stage, introducing the program in the very city where I was once told, "You're not leadership material." A familiar face showed up near the back of the crowd. Dad. He looked older, smaller, like the weight of what he'd done had finally caught up. After the speech, he came up to me slowly, hands in pockets. "I saw the article," he said. "It was impressive." I nodded. "You've built something incredible, Olivia." "I did," I replied, "without anyone's help." He nodded again, looking down. "We made mistakes." "You made choices," I corrected. "Mistakes are accidents. This wasn't one." He looked like he wanted to say more, but I was already turning away. There were others to greet, People who believed in me from the beginning. People who hadn't needed to be proven wrong before they started showing respect. As I walked back toward the crowd, someone handed me a mic for the panel discussion. I looked around, took a breath, and smiled. Because the girl they once called a waste of potential had become the gatekeeper of opportunity, and the only thing my family had left was regret. Weeks passed. The accelerator was thriving. 3 startups had already secured seed funding through my network. I was building not just a company, but a community, a space for people who'd been told no too many times. People like me. But just when I thought it was over, a letter arrived at my office. Handwritten. No return address. I opened it, carefully, expecting maybe another apology. Instead, it was worse. It was from my grandfather's lawyer. Apparently, my trust fund had stipulations, ones my parents conveniently never mentioned. The money was never meant to be handed over to Dylan. Legally, it couldn't be touched until I turned 30, unless I gave written consent. I never had. Thus, signatures used to transfer the fund, forged. I stared at the paper, the air knocked out of me. This wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud, criminal, calculated, cold. The letter ended with a line that changed everything. If you wish to pursue legal action, we believe you have a strong case. I didn't hesitate. By the end of the week, I'd filed charges, fraud, identity theft, misappropriation of funds. Mom and Dad were served in their driveway. Suddenly, the same people who once looked at me like I was nothing were facing prison, time because they couldn't stand to see me shine on my own. But here's the real twist. I didn't do it for revenge. I didn't even want the money back. I did it so they could never do it to anyone else, and because no one, not even family, gets to write you off and walk away clean. A month later, I stood at a rooftop fundraiser my company hosted for women in tech. The skyline glowed behind me. Investors mingled with engineers. Young girls asked questions like, "How do you stay strong when no one believes in you?" I smiled. "Easy," I said. "You believe in yourself louder." That night, I stood alone for a moment, looking out at the city that once swallowed me whole. I thought about the girl who used to cry into ramen cups and stay up coding until dawn. She wasn't gone. She'd just evolved. And now, she wasn't begging to be seen. She was the spotlight,